Hello, welcome to Golfing Idiots. Today we're going to remove an iron head from a shaft. So not really any difference between woods, wedges, or irons when it comes to shaft removal. But I figured, hey, I'd do this video anyway just in case someone wants to see if there's any differences or thinks that there might be. So let's get started. Okay, so we've applied our heat to the ferrule and removed that from the shaft. If you don't know how to remove a ferrule, check out the video on the website that talks about ferrule removal. So make sure it's clean. Keep in mind also, sometimes with some of the newer golf clubs, that you're going to get what's called a collared ferrule, okay, instead of just a flush ferrule to the bottom of the hosel. And that's going to have a slight part of the ferrule that will be inside of the hosel, just right there at the not very far in, but a little bit in. So you may have to struggle with that a little bit. Sometimes there'll be remnants left, and what you can do in that instance, if you've got pieces of a collared ferrule still left, just use a straight razor, box cutter, and come up to the shaft like that. Always cut away from yourself, again, with any type of sharp instrument, but you can get the rest of it out along those lines. And that will allow enough clearance between the bottom of the hosel so that you can go ahead and place it in the shaft extractor and remove the head, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, so we have our club ready to go. We're going to place it in the extractor and remove the head with heat. Extractors are pretty easy to work with. I would bring the action back a little bit. Always make sure that the padding is clean so that it has a solid grip on the shaft. And make sure you never use acetone in order to clean those pads. Just any type of simple maybe cleaner. I use typically epoxy Be Gone on a rag to clean it. All right, so we're going to place that head right here in the shaft extractor. Typically use a bit of solid pressure. Okay, you don't want to crank down on it too much, but you want to make sure that shaft is not going anywhere. Now this is a spring-loaded shaft extractor, which works out great. So how those work, you're going to load up the shaft, and it has an unloaded and loaded point. I typically move it just a little past loaded, so it has the right amount of pressure on the hosel within the shaft extractor, and then I'm going to apply heat. Okay. Now, for the most part, typically does not take terribly long in order to loosen up the epoxy. Now it depends. If it's an older club and the epoxy's been there for quite some time, it could take a little longer. In other instances, it's very quick. Just depends, and it really doesn't matter. The one thing you have to be careful for in here, and I talked about this in the do's and don'ts, is the application of heat on a graphite shaft. If you try to remove a golf shaft on your own, especially graphite, the house, I talked about that in my do's and don'ts video, that you can really wreck the graphite shaft in that twisting motion if the shaft has gotten overheated, and you'll ruin it very quickly. So check out the do's and don'ts video if you're not sure of what I'm talking about there. So apply a little bit more heat. It is starting to give just a little bit. And I can see that it's starting to move forward in the machine, within the extractor. Make sure you don't have the heat source too close. You don't want to scorch, place any burn marks on the club head itself. And this club is approximately, this is a Mizuno Tezoid MX20, probably about a 2003, so it's about 12 years old, with what looks to be the original shaft in the club. That epoxy is pretty old. Usually by now the seal of the epoxy has broken. But what the heat does is break down that epoxy to where it loosens on the shaft and will allow it to release the club. Might speed up this video some in order to get to the end product. And there it goes. And you saw it just jump and release. Sometimes it's not that sudden. It usually eases off. So at this point in time, just make sure you watch where you grab the head and push it straight off. And there's your club. Club head's removed. It's going to be very hot. So again, just watch yourself, okay? When you use it, release the club. I always twist and go forward with the shafts to make sure that the broken down epoxy doesn't get within the gears of the shaft extractor, or definitely not on the padding. You don't want it there. It's just a mess you have to clean up later. And if you're doing a job with a few, then obviously you're shooting yourself in the foot. So that's it. And that's how you remove the shaft from an iron head. Now, there's a couple things you want to do once you've gotten the iron head separated from the shaft. First, I would tell you, while everything's still relatively warm, and in some instances it could be extremely hot, so be careful. Go ahead and clean off the epoxy from the shaft. That way, if you're reinserting the shaft, maybe you're flowing the shaft and you're going to put it right back in the head, it's already easier to have it cleaned up, so it's closer to being ready to go. You want to do the same thing with the hosel. Okay, we've got to get all the old epoxy junk crud out of there. So all you need to do, well, don't do that. But anyway, take your drill. Okay, you can buy these little cleaner bits. There you go. Golfsmith, Golfworks, pretty much anything online that has to do with any type of repair with golf equipment. You typically can't find these in Home Depot and Lowe's. They're a bit harder to find. Find some in a weapons kit, as far as if type of bore cleaner, that would work. But I'm going to place it in the hosel, okay, and clean out that old epoxy. Now, relatively simple. You can pop that on and you're going to see that old epoxy fall out. You want to ensure you continue doing this until that old epoxy is not applying any residue after you insert the club, drill, and then tap it on your workbench. Now, this is very important for two reasons. One, you want to get the old epoxy out of here so that you can get a solid bond. Also, when you're using the brush within the hosel, once it's clean, it's going to rough up the inside a little bit, and that's going to allow for a better bond with the epoxy when you insert the shaft, which we're going to do in the next video. So I hope that helps as far as how to remove a shaft from a golf head. If you got any questions or any comments, anything that you'd like to see, hey, drop some below, please. Other than that, make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching.